Hello guys, I am Paul McWhorter from ExtremePrepper.com, and today I am going to talk to you about whether or not grid tie solar systems pay for themselves, whether they actually make sense or not. And if you look back here, you can see a system that I had installed at my house. It's about a 5 kilowatt system, and I had that system installed in 2009. As I mentioned, it's a grid tie system. If you really want to go off the grid, you've got a whole different mathematics to deal with, because you've got to pay for the batteries, you've got to maintain the batteries, and you've got to replace the batteries. And so when you go off grid, things change quite a bit. In fact, I think you could probably spend about as much on the batteries as you do on the solar panels themselves. And so the math is very different for an off-grid system. What I'm going to be talking to you today is about a grid tie system. As I mentioned, I had my system installed in 2009, and so we're coming up on like 7 or 8 years now. I'm in my 8th year of having these things up and running, so I've got a lot of data because I monitor their production every single day, and I've got a lot of charts and graphs and all types of stuff to analyze whether these things actually made sense or not. First thing that I'm going to show you is one thing that you notice is, let me get out of your way a little bit here. Okay. One thing you notice is you notice that I have a system that's in the backyard that is not on the roof, and that's going to affect your cost a little bit about whether they just put them on the roof or whether they put them in the backyard. But let me tell you why I chose to have mine put in the backyard. And it comes down to something that my dad taught me when I was growing up, and I followed it all my life, and it has served me well, and that is, if your roof is not leaking, do not touch it. If your roof is not leaking, do not touch it. So if you have a roof that doesn't leak, the last thing that you want to do is have a bunch of people up there climbing on it, drilling holes, installing things, manipulating your roof, because if you've ever had a roof that leaks, you know that that can be a very, very difficult challenge. And so because my roof didn't leak, I didn't want anybody messing with my roof. The second thing is that imagine you have all of these solar panels put up there, and you know that roofs have to be replaced every once in a while. Well, how is that going to complicate it when you need new shingles or you need something fixed, and what the roofer is going to deinstall all of this high-tech equipment and then reinstall it? I don't think so. Okay, so you could disagree. Be great to hear your comments down in the comments below, but for me, I did not want these things on my roof. Also, I live in a rural area, and I have 10 acres, and so it was no problem finding a nice spot for these in the backyard. So that's one thing that you've got to decide. You've got to decide whether you're going to have them on the roof or whether you're going to have them on the ground. I chose the ground. Okay, so what has been my experience about having these things up and running for the last 8 years? Well, first thing, before you really jump into this and think about it, you've got to say, well, what if something happens to them? And in particular, living in West Texas, the question is, what happens with hail damage? Okay, what I have found is that I have found that these have been fairly resistant to hail damage. Okay, in fact, living in West Texas, we have quite a few hailstorms. I've never had a panel get broken because of hail. What I've seen is on occasions we have had some hail where the largest stones were approaching the size of a golf ball. Now, this isn't something that I've scientifically measured, but I'm just saying, looking out, seemed like we saw some bigger than marble size hail and something that would be approaching a golf ball. And on those, I did not have any solar panels broken. Also understand, though, that there's sort of a parameter of how hard that hailstone is, and there's some hailstones that are a little more on the slushy side and some that are a little bit more on the rock hard side, and that might make a little bit of a difference. But if I were going to give you a rule of thumb, probably large marble, I think you're going to be completely safe. If you get something golf ball size, you might be getting in the danger zone, and if you get something that starts approaching a baseball size, you're probably going to have some solar panels damaged. For me, when I got these solar panels, they were covered on my homeowner's insurance. I had my insurance agent come out. You need to check with your insurance agent, but my insurance agent came out and said that it would be considered part of the house. And in fact, it did not change my insurance rate at all. He says, yes, that they need to be put on the policy and show that they're there, but they actually, for me, didn't change my insurance rates. All right. Now, I would imagine if every 3 years you were getting these things knocked out with hailstorms, you probably your insurance rates would go up. But for right now, they've never been damaged, and they didn't impact my my rates. The other thing to understand is that the prices I'm going to be telling you that seem to be kind of reasonable prices right now for these things, I'm quoting you not a do-it-yourself cost, not a cost of the panel itself, but a turnkey installation cost, because you got to understand there's a lot of things that go into the cost of a solar system. There's the price of the panel itself, which a lot of times isn't that much, but in addition to the panels inside your house, you have to have an inverter, and that inverter takes the DC voltage coming off of the solar panels, changes it to electricity that your house can use, plus it's got to sync it up with the grid. And so it's a pretty big system and pretty expensive. So a lot of your cost is in the cost of the inverter. Plus, a lot of your cost is going to be in the installation costs. So you see that we had people that knew what they were doing that came in and mounted these things on a very secure base, ran the electric line to the house, installed the inverter in the garage, and then got it all synced up. Plus, the guys that installed mine did all the paperwork and made all the arrangements with the power company, because you just can't tie something to the grid without talking to the power company. And if you looked at it, there was a whole lot of paperwork. So that's something that I really recommend, not a do-it-yourself thing. First of all, playing with your main lines, you can kill yourself and you can get in trouble with the power company, and you've got to do things safely and legally. And so I found it was well worth it to have professional solar installers to come in and do this. And so those are kind of some of the factors to think about. But now let's get down to the real question of, does it make financial sense? Okay, does it make financial sense? Well, let's see if I can come over, and I actually ran the numbers here, and let's talk about this. First of all, I believe you can see this, and so let's go down and talk about some of my numbers. First of all, I installed the system in October of 2009. Right now, it is, as of making this video, it is March of 2017. And so that looks like kind of in my 8th year of production. What size plant did I install? I installed a 5 kilowatt system. Now, you've got to be real careful about projecting how much electricity you are going to produce based on the system, and you don't come in and just say, okay, 5,000 kilowatts times, oh, the sun's shining 10 hours a day, 50 kilowatt hours. No, it's not that simple. It's not that simple at all. What I would say is, for me, in my location, location also matters a lot. How much sunshine do you get? Sun shines a lot more in West Texas than it does in Seattle, Washington. Also, the length of your days. Where is the sun? Okay, we get a lot of good hours of nice, bright, high in the sky sun. Also matters about your altitude. The higher the altitude you are, the thinner the air, the more photons that you're going to get on your solar panels. So I'm telling you these numbers for West Texas. Good thing about West Texas is we get a lot of bright, sunshiny days. Another good thing about West Texas is we're sort of in the south, so we're getting a lot of that really high in the sky sunshine that you want. One of the things that's not so great about West Texas, the efficiency of these solar panels depends on the temperature. And so therefore, if we get some really hot 110 days In the summer, that lowers the efficiency of the solar panels, and so you're not producing as much. I get my best production in the spring and in the fall, where you're getting bright sun but you have cool weather, and so that's when my best production is. But my plant size is 5 kilowatts. Okay. And how much do I produce per day? I'm going to jump down here and see, where was that? My daily production is about 25 kilowatts, 25 kilowatt hours. All right. And so my 5 kilowatt plant is about, say on average about 5 times what my plant production is. I do get days where I get 35 kilowatt hours produced, and then on days that there's no sunshine, you just get maybe a couple of kilowatt hours produced. So again, weather is a pretty big factor, but I think averaging this out over 10 years, over 8 years, hopefully this will be kind of useful to you. So my plant size was 5 kilowatts. All right. Now, your prices are going to vary depending on who does it, how complicated the install is, all of that sort of thing. But when I had mine installed, the turnkey cost for installation, that is, the guys, my solar contractor bought everything, came to my house, installed everything, did all the paperwork with the electric company to get it turned on, did every single thing. So the total cost that I had to pay was about $5 per installed watt. Okay, $5 per installed watt. So I had a 5 kilowatt system times 5 came out to $25,000 for the total cost of the system installed, including everything. Okay. As I've looked around the web, it looks like that those costs in the last 8 years have come down. Probably the labor cost, I would imagine, have gone up, but the cost of the components, the cost of the solar panels themselves, and the cost of the inverters have come down. Probably the hardware, installation hardware, the pipes and connectors and screws, that probably went up. But overall, the turnkey cost has come down. And I see people in the Texas area that are advertising installation costs that are closer to $4 per installed watt. And so perhaps you could get numbers a little bit better than this. But I'm not basing my analysis on whether it makes sense or not on what you might be able to get installed for today. I'm basing my analysis on what I actually paid for it, and that was some 8 years ago. Okay, so for me the installed cost was $25,000. Okay. At the time, the power company was giving incentives because I think there were some government regulations that they needed to be using solar more. So they would pay homeowners, they would pay a portion of the installation cost to homeowners if you got the solar installed. The nice thing is the solar installer that I was using actually filled out that paperwork to get those incentives for me, and so I got a cool $7,500, I believe, somewhere right around there from the power company. This might or might not be available to you. The incentives might be available and you might not get them because they usually put a certain amount aside, and then as people apply they hand them out till they're not available anymore. So if I were you, I would not really count on this, but if you played your cards right, you might be able to get somewhere in the 20 to 30% range incentive. Okay, so that brought my turnkey cost down to $17,500. Okay, and then at the time there was a federal tax incentive, and I believe my federal tax incentive was a little over $5,000. And so after combining the power company installation incentive and the federal tax credit incentive, I believe that my out-of-cost pocket was about $12,250. So that was a little over $2 an installed watt after incentives. Now, for you, The thing is, I don't know what the tax rules are right now, but you'll want to check the federal tax rules. Also, you could probably now get a better cost on the turnkey installation, but you might not be able to get this, and so you're going to have to kind of play around with these numbers on your own. But what I hope you're going to see is I hope you're going to see a way of thinking about it. Okay, so my out-of-pocket expenses after the incentives was $12,250, or a little over $2 an installed watt. Now, I have looked at my production over the last 8 years, and the total amount of electricity that I have produced has been 68.6 megawatt hours. Okay, and if I divide that total production over the number of days, total number of days, I have produced a total of 25 kilowatt hours per day. Okay, now most days I look and I'm getting 30 kilowatt hours or better, but then there's days when there's no sun. Okay, there's days that it's cloudy. There's months where it's cloudy for a week. But this production is something that is averaged out over the last 8 years, and so that is a pretty good number. So how much does this generate? How much money does this system generate? Well, it kind of depends on what you're paying for electricity, and I've looked around, and in my area, kind of a reasonable rate is about 10 cents a kilowatt hour. I think I'm paying 11 cents a kilowatt hour, but I just put a nice round number of 10 cents a kilowatt hour. And what that means is that I am averaging a production of $2.56 a day in electricity. Okay, $2.56 a day in electricity on this system that cost $25,000 that really just cost me $12,250. So the total amount produced to date in dollars at this 10 cent a kilowatt hour is $6,860. That would probably be, if I use the 11 cents, up over $7,000 that I've produced off of this system. And what this says is that for the system to totally pay for itself, it would take about 13 years for it to totally pay for itself. And that's based on these subsidized number. Okay, so this kind of sounds pretty like, well, why bother? You might say, well, gee, it's going to take forever. I mean, when something takes 13 years to pay for itself, your tendency is to say that's forever. It would take forever to pay for itself. I would be better off putting the money to use somewhere else. Okay, I'm going to suggest that there's a different way to look at it. So let's say that I have $12,250 sitting in the bank. Okay, I have $12,250 sitting in the bank. What is the best I could hope to do on a certificate of deposit? I don't know. It has gotten so depressing on interest rates at the bank in the last 8 years. I don't even know. I don't even know if you can get 1%. It looks like a checking or savings account is paying about 0.5%. But I just made up a number and I said, what if on average over the last 8 years you could get 1.5% return on your investment? So a certificate of deposit, $12,250 with an interest rate of 1.5%. You would get an annual return on your $12,250 of a whopping $18.75. Okay, $18.75 a year. The total return since 2009, if you put this money in the bank, if you put this money in the bank at 1.5%, I believe that you would end up with a total return in 8 years of $1,345 if I did the math right. Okay, so if you look at this in that same period of time, my solar panels produce $6,870 to where that same money in the bank would just produce $1,345. And so the advantage of solar that I have over the last 8 years has been $5,514.40. So I'm going to say that me having this money in solar panels was better than me having this money in the bank. Okay, but I'm gonna argue that there's sort of some advantages, even an advantage to that, and also some things that you have to think about. Okay, I'm gonna argue that one of the advantages of this that makes it greater than just what it looks at now is, okay, yes, the advantage of is $5,514 over a certificate of deposit, but this is the thing, okay? Solar panels are a hedge against inflation, and in particular a hedge against hyperinflation. And let me tell you, so let's look this creeping inflation. You know, they say inflation is 1 or 2% or nothing, but they play games in the way that they calculate it. Man, the things I have to have when I go to the grocery store, don't tell me that groceries inflation is 1 or 2%. It looks like more 10 or 15 or in some cases 20% inflation on the things that I have to buy in order to live. Let me give you an example. When I was a kid, I could get a haircut for $1. Okay, $1 for a haircut. Now, if I go get just a simple men's haircut, it's $20. So let's say in 40 years, the price of a haircut has gone from $1 to $20. Okay, I'm 55. My dad lived to be a really old age, so I very well could live, God willing, another 40 years. Okay, so what does that mean? I'm an old man, and a haircut is going to cost me $400. Man, I can't afford that. All right, so I don't get a haircut, or I just cut my own hair. Yeah, I can cut my own hair, but I still have to have milk, and I have to still have to have things like this. The nice thing is a good chunk of your living expenses can be your utility bill. And if you can lock in that utility bill and hedge against inflation, you are protecting yourself about unforeseen changes in electricity. Okay, right now there seems to be kind of an energy glut, energy costs are low, but you don't know what conditions could change in the world that could cause a drastic increase in the cost of electricity. And so what I like about solar panels is they're better than money in the bank right now, and they are a hedge against inflation. Okay, 2 thumbs up for that. Now, some other things that you have to consider, and man, you have to figure these things out before you go and buy solar panels. And one is net metering available in your area? Now, there's this old wives' tale, and that is, hey, hook this stuff up to your house and it'll make your meter run backwards, and then they have to pay you. They have to pay you, like there's this law that they have to pay you. No such law. No such law. They don't have to pay you for the electricity that you're putting back on the grid. Okay, they don't have to. You cannot make them pay you for the electricity that you are putting back on the grid. So you have to see, does your power company in your area offer what is called net metering? Okay, do they offer net metering? When I first got my solar panels, the utility provider that I was using did not offer net metering. Okay, and it is way, way worse than what you think. Solar does not work if you cannot get net metering, because think of this. When do you use electricity? You get up in the morning. Your wife turns on her hair dryer. You turn on the oven and put your bread in there. It's dark. You turn all the lights on in the house. Man, you've got the lights on. You've got the oven going. You've got the microwave going. You've got the tea kettle going. You've got the hair dryer going. You've got the radios going. Everything going in the morning. And it's dark. And you're not producing any electricity at all. Everybody goes to school. Everybody goes to work. The sun comes up. You're producing electricity. You're not using any. That electricity is going back out on the grid. And if you're not getting credit for it, you're never, ever, ever going to make solar make sense. Then also think what happens. You come home, sun's going down. What do? You cook supper. You turn the oven on. Your wife throws the clothes in the washing machine in the dryer. You're using your electricity in the morning before you're producing electricity, and in the evening after the sun goes down. And then that's when you're using electricity at the beginning and the end of the day, but you're producing it in the middle. And so if you get solar panels without net metering, man, you're just going to get a few pennies a day. Okay, you're just going to get a few pennies a day. So you have to get net. You have to have net metering in order for solar panels to work. Okay, now with net metering, this is the next thing that you have to understand. Solar does not make your meter run backwards. That is a wives' tale. If they offer net metering, what they do is the power company comes out, they take your old meter off, and they put a new smart meter in. That smart meter measures how much electricity you are sucking off of the grid, and then how much electricity you are putting back on the grid. And you know what? They might say that they're offering net metering, but they might not pay you the same rate that they charge you. This is what some power companies do with net metering. They say, you want to buy electricity from us? Great. It's 12 cents a kilowatt hour when you buy electricity from us. Thank you very much. Oh, you want to sell us electricity? We'll pay you 3 cents a kilowatt hour. So it sort of makes sense, because they say, well, we're a big buyer. That's what we pay for electricity. That's what we pay power companies for electricity. We pay them 3 or 4 cents a kilowatt hour. That's all we're going to pay you. Okay. And if you have that deal, it's not going to make sense, because during the middle of the day, you are pumping your electricity back onto the grid at 3 cents a kilowatt hour. And in the evening, you're sucking that expensive electricity off, and you're in the middle of the day pushing that cheap electricity on. It will not make sense. Okay, the power company that I have is called Green Mountain Energy, and they are available in Texas. I'm not sure where else they are available. I am not sure what deals they offer in different places, but what they are offering me, and I've gotten for the last number of years, is they offer me 100% net metering at the same rate they're charging me. So when I'm putting electricity on the grid, they're paying me 10 or 11 cents, whatever it is, per kilowatt hour. And when I'm taking it off, they're charging me 10 or 11%. So they are giving what would be a very, very fair, very generous deal. Now, because they advertise, they're sort of a green company, so they want that clean energy, because they say that all they sell is clean energy. So it's a little special situation that you get there. But you've got to make sure, number one, that you can get net metering, and then number two, you've got to make sure that they're paying you the same thing as they're charging you, so to make it all make sense. So if Green Mountain Energy is available in your area, I've found them to be the most fair. Also, you've got to check the rates, because there's some places that might say, okay, just their straight deal would be 8 cents a kilowatt hour, but if you want net metering, they will charge you 12 cents a kilowatt hour for the electricity you use, and they will pay you 12 cents a kilowatt hour for the electricity that you put back. But the fact is that you're probably going to be using more than you're putting back, and so then that net difference amount you're going to be paying a higher rate on. What I have found with my 5 kilowatt system is in the winter and spring, when I'm not running the air conditioners, I can have a 0 or a negative electric bill. And in the summer, when I turn the, West Texas is very hot, and I turn the air conditioners on, then I become a net consumer of electricity. So if I really wanted to run if I wanted no electric bill and I wanted to be able to run the air conditioners in the summer, I would need a system probably about twice as big as what I have. So what I try to do is just use the air conditioner sparingly, have it a little warmer in the house, and really try to manage my electric costs. So got to make sure that you have have net metering. You got to make sure that you have fair rates on the net metering. And then the other thing is you got to really look at your weather conditions. West Texas is really a very good place for solar because we have a lot of sunshiny days. Man, I've got even better than Texas. I've got a friend in New Mexico that lives in the mountains, and so he has cool days at that high altitude with very bright sun. And high altitude means there's not a lot of air, so it's just sort of like a lot of photons reaching them, cool weather. Man, he really does well on his solar production. Kind of like the further you go north, the lower the sun is in the sky, and then you're kind of coming in at an angle where you're really going through a lot of atmosphere. And man, you've got to really talk to people in the area and see if solar makes sense, depending on your weather conditions. In general, of course, the cloudier it is, the worse you're going to be. The further north you are, the worse you're going to be. So that map location really matters a lot as well. Okay, well, for me, again, speaking with going on 8 years of experience, I've been very pleased with solar. My only regret with solar is I wish I'd gotten a system twice as big back then. It was just I wasn't sure about it, so I didn't want to invest that extra money. But for me, it's made a lot of sense, and I think it's something that really can work. The final thing that I'll say is kind of degradation over time. Let's see if I can come over here. I've looked, because your solar panels do over time begin to produce less. And so you can see a graph here, I hope, of my production. Let me see if I can get this where you can see it all at once. Oh, man. Sorry, I should have had this queued up already, but it's a little bit of an afterthought. Okay, well, what you can see is I'll just scroll through it I've just went back to 2012 to 2016, and you can see my annual production went gradually down. This was just like a cloudy year, okay? But what you really care about is kind of percentages, and so I come down here and I look at the percentage drop, and man, this graph is really too big for this. But you can see that I fit a line to the degradation, and what I seem to be losing is about 2 or 3% per year in production. That as those rays keep hitting those solar panels, the plexiglass or whatever the covering is starts kind of getting a little discolored, starts getting a little aged, and I seem to be losing about 3% per year in production. But I consider that to be absolutely fine, and plus, at some point solar panels are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and at some point, if the production is just like half what it started out, I could go in and replace the solar panels, because since the infrastructure is already there, I could do that myself. And the inverter is still in the garage working, and all the mounting hardware, all of that, it would not be an enormous expense to just have to replace the solar panels. And so I've been very pleased with how the production has held up over the last 8 years. I am, over the last 8 years, maybe down about 15% over 8 years in the production. Okay, guys, I hope you will leave your thoughts down below. Leave your thoughts, your comments. Does this make sense? Have you had this experience? Have you had other experience? Let me know what you're thinking with this. If you like this video, think about giving it a thumbs up. Think about subscribing to the channel or sharing this with other people. Paul McWhorter with ExtremePrepper.com. I will talk to you guys later.